All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Lectern Q&A. We do these monthly where we get a chance to talk to John regarding some questions that you guys have introduced or submitted beforehand. And nowadays we're trying something new where it's like it seems to be that there's a trajectory in the kind of questions that are being asked. And where we left off last month, which was centered around meaning, somehow ended up on love. And so that's what we're picking up with this month. And then we'll see where it takes us. And then that will decide where we go next month. So the way this works is we'll talk for a little bit for about maybe about half an hour thereabouts. And then we'll open up to a live Q&A. So if you're listening, by all means, drop some questions in the chat. And then it might just be that I get an opportunity to call on you to come on and ask your question, or I'll ask it on your behalf. Right, so, having said all that, how are you doing, John?
I'm good, Ethan. It's good to be here with you, and with you too, Ellie.
Yes. And having said that, this is given the topic of love. I thought it was wonderful to invite my personal beautiful partner, Ellie, into a chat with us. I think there's a way in which when she spoke, it's like, okay, she appears. So yeah, Ellie will be joining us, and we get to have an extra interlocutor in this conversation.
That's
so
welcome.
Very welcome. So well, let's start off by, I want to just put back to you, John, the kind of what has gone around on various platforms in the way that you talk about love. And this is something I want to check with you to see if there's been a reformulation of some sort. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, not at all.
Okay, great. Okay, let me just try and adjust this a little bit. Okay, so the way that I've heard you talk about it is, well, one, love cannot be a physical sensation. So we don't want to boil it down to, it's just some chemical reactions that's happening inside my nervous system. Because if we do that, we have to follow that all the way down to the level of like atoms and molecules and quarks and probability distribution. And then, oh no, that doesn't work, right? So it's not physical. It also can't be
it can't be reduced to a merely physical sensation. I would not say it's not physical.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Right. Sorry about that. So it cannot be reduced to a purely physical sensation. It also cannot just be our feelings and the pure affect of it, because then we get lost in some kind of decadent romanticism, where it becomes only associated with pleasure, and then we lose all of the other dimensions of experience that come with that. Right? I think I recently added something to that, and I think we've spoken about this, which is that it also cannot be an idea. So we don't want to fall in love with just the idea of the person and what they could be, right? Like, you don't want to have a predetermined image, an algorithmic pattern of the kind of person, your type. So it's also not cognitive in that sense. And so what that boils down to is that actually love is something that is at the ground of all of those, which afford all of those, but cannot be reduced to any one of those aspects. And you named it as love being an existential stance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like a virtue, which I think is where we got to.
Yeah. It's one of the classic theological virtues from Christianity, and love is very interesting because it's both within Christianity, also relatedly, I believe in Sufism. Love is both our way of knowing, which is an existential stance, not just having ideas, and but also a name for God, which is really interesting. Um, Love is not an emotion. That's our most common misunderstanding, because because I love Sarah, that can make me happy, angry, sad, lonely, etc. Love is a particular way in which there's a binding between me and another person. So for me, love is, if insight is the epitome of perspectival knowing, then love is the epitome of participatory knowing. It's a knowing by binding of identity, reciprocally opening, And I think it's a virtue precisely because love orients us towards excellence, arete, the Greek notion. It orients us towards that which should involve us and integrate us as a whole person. Um, you should love Ellie not just with your mind, but with your heart and with your body and with your soul. So it should. We expect that when we genuinely love someone or even something, we can fall in love with a place. We can fall in love with a piece of music. Um, it involves our whole person in a particular way. So it's a profound kind of participatory knowing. Uh, I reciprocally open. I commit myself. It's active commitment, and that's where the virtue starts to come in. I build up skills and belief and states of mind and traits of character that afford me continually reciprocally opening with some other than me. And then this moves through three dimensions. There's Eros, which has to do with wanting to be one with, and this is very much at the level of relevance realization, that kind of being at one with the world, that is so necessary for agency. I think we so within relevance realization, there's a fundamental primordial kind of caring about this information rather than that information, and it's vectored in terms of how I'm a living thing caring about myself. But we move beyond that. We're not just agents; we're also selves. We narratively extend into we narratively extend into time, um, and so now we're talking about resonance realization, in which I am not just I want to get that well, what Hartmut Rosa calls resonance, and resonance is when we start to pivot to give a proper place to the otherness of the other. Resonance cannot work unless the other is to some degree beyond my grasp, unpredictable, uncontrollable to me. So his examples of resonance, and we all know what they're like. You see a beautiful sunset, you hear a beautiful piece of music. It has to have a degree that is beyond your expectations. If it is just absolutely normal to you, you will not move into resonance. And of course, profound resonance is the flow state. And this is very much, flow is the epitome of Philia. It's when we are doing this co-creation, and we are bound together in a kind of love of reciprocity and reciprocal opening. But then we move further uh, because love orients us as persons, as I said. It orients us towards the transcendentals, the true, the good, and obviously the beautiful. Um, and so I assume you love Ellie because you find her beautiful. She is a good person, and she is eminently real to you. So love is a virtue that cultivates a virtuosity for coming into a reverence for what is most real, and that makes us persons. Love is this is the person making capacity of love. This is this is how the virtue orients us to and binds us to the normative dimensions. So we have, we have the nomological, and then we have the narrative, and then we have the normative. And love is moving through all of those. And I think when you love a person, obviously romantically, there should be a pursuit of at-one-ment, and that of course is often expressed sexually, but it's also expressed by living with the person. And then, of course, there should be a profound kind of friendship, a deep reciprocity and reciprocal opening. And then that should afford glimpses through the person. The person becomes, you start to realize the person is a doorway to the universe, a particular portal that is irreplaceable. If Ali were to come leave your life, there's a whole way in which the universe is disclosed to you that becomes totally inaccessible to you again. And you start, and I think this is part of how love, because it plugs us into the transcendentals and orients us towards what is ultimate, is also thought to be a way in which we most profoundly participate in the sacred. And that, of course, is agape, because we're engaged in the person making reverence. Um, and then I think what I would finally say about uh, love is that love commits us to what John Wright calls sensibility transcendence. What comes out of reciprocal opening is not just acts of reframing and insight, but acts of us reframing our reframing abilities, and not just making sense in a new way, but in a new way making sense, right? Which is a different thing. We're not just looking at the bottle differently, we're looking at everything differently. And when it takes on that comprehensive sensibility transcendence, it transfers broadly and deeply, and transforms through all those levels, personhood, selfhood, agency. And then I think it becomes a way of life. And I think that was the great promise of Christianity. That's the great promise in Sufism. Um, a version of this is present in Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva and Karuna. Um, and then finally, it's even present in Taoism. I'm coming to real. I want to say something about that in a sec about the divine, but I'm coming to realize, that even in Taoism there is this aspect, because the Tao is frequently described as something like a mother, and of course a mother demonstrates agape. Taoism is the religion of flow, which is Philia, but you also get a profound state of at one-ment. There's a mystical dimension, and so I see this in various emphasis through many of the Silk Road legacy religions.
I want to double click on something that you talked about, which is the normativity and the way in which affordances open up in a particular way. So this is something which I've noticed. Which is that something that's occurred in the relationship that I have with Ellie is that there are certain ways of behaving, or that ways that I'm motivated towards certain things, or the world, or certain relationships, that I might, for lack of a better term, other from myself, right? Or I look at punitively in some way. I have a certain way of treating an opinion that I have, or a judgment that I have, or a person in my life, and Ellie's done this amazing thing by, how do I say this, holding or being with me, and that part of me which is other, that allows me to bring it closer, or see it differently. And in doing that, that opens up a whole different dimension of affordances. Something similar to what Thomas was saying yesterday in the Silk Road seminar. Like, there's a way in which one can be held in that. And that's scary as shit. It's confrontational, because it's like, but there's this part of me that always doesn't like people who do X, X, Y, Y, Z, Z. And Ellie has shown me that, yeah, oh, you think that way. Okay, well, what's it like to think that way? What do you want? Right? And to be with me in that, which has been incredibly transformative. And I want to throw it over to you a bit, Ellie. Like, what do you think? Is there something in that that resonates with you, or across what John has said and what I've shared? How's that landing for you?
So many things. Yeah, I really love, John, how it gave us like a really nice map of love. And yeah, the question that came up for me when you were speaking was like, but how do I know that I'm experiencing love? And then also like the different kinds of love. Like there's a part of me that really wants to ground that in something like somatic, or and it's funny because I was just thinking of when I first met Ethan. I had actually went to Google what it feels like to like someone, because I wasn't sure, like the kind of somatic feelings that were sensations that were coming up. I'm like, well, but I feel like this with my sister too, when we're having fun. So it's like, yeah, how do I know that I'm experiencing love, and by extension, like whether it's agape love or Eros, or
Sure.
yeah, something like that.
I'll respond to both of these and try to weave them together. Ethan, I think this is a profound aspect, and I thank you for calling it out. I haven't put enough explicit emphasis on it. And this is a really easy thing to say, and it's a profound thing to realize and to remember to realize. Your lover loves you differently than you love yourself. And we forget that. We fall into an automaticity that they love us and know us the way we love and know ourselves. And that becomes very, very, when we lose that distinction in practice, not just in thought, when we lose that distinction, then we can fall prey to a kind of consumptive attitude towards the lover. The lover becomes an extension of me in some kind of fashion. But the lover Sarah does this for me all the time. She loves aspects of me that I'm sort of disposed to neglecting or rejecting. And she also doesn't love as much parts of me that I really like about myself. And this causes me to constantly go through a transformative experience, which is what would it be like to be closer to the alignment of my aspects that I behold in Sarah's eyes? What might I be if I were to realign to that aspectual configuration, right? And it's a really interesting thing because there's a deep, I don't know if this is the case for you, but there's a deep resistance in me. There's a deep resistance because the brain profoundly loves familiarity. And there's something very unfamiliar about it's something like I'm gonna play with language here. It's something like my my relational avatar is part of me that I haven't properly considered, or something like that. And I think one of the great gifts is when you know that somebody loves you very comprehensively, but that doesn't mean they love you identically to the way that you love yourself. And what happens for me is I get glimpses of a stereoscopic vision of John, how Sarah sees me, the different aspect configuration, what's foregrounded, background, what's emphasized, what's de-emphasized, what's accepted, what's rejected. That's very different from what I do. And I get moments where I'm looking through both of those, and I get a deeper access to a kind of Socratic knowledge of myself. And I think that's one of the great gifts. I think to even put it more strongly, I think part of what we grieve when we lose a person that we've loved is not only that particular portal to the entire universe, we lose a particular access to ourselves that is actually very important for us, for any of our significant aspiration. Because, of course, your lover, flawed as they may be, and that's important to remember, has your best interest at heart if they love you. Ellie, knowing love has to do with just that. I mean, if you really like somebody, you start to know yourself differently. You start to feel and understand yourself differently. You start to get a shifting in your salience landscape. Because love is I think love is the epitome of participatory knowing. And so when you really love someone or something, knowing the beloved, and knowing yourself are not separate acts. They are inseminated within each other, and they interpenetrate each other. So I know that I love Sarah because I have a pronounced, prominent, and reliable experience that she brings out the best in me. And I have a pronounced, reliable report from her that I trust, that I bring out the best in her. And I think for me, that has been the like, and we both identify with that. We both identify with that. For me, that's the most reliable mark. Of course, that's what I try to have with my children. I try to be with them such as to bring out the best in them. They don't bear a reciprocal responsibility to a degree until they're full blown adults, right? But I try to bring out the best in them. That's what I'm doing when I'm loving them. And when I have an erotic relationship to a work of art, I am trying to dispose myself to it, to become one with it, because, right, that brings out the best in what it is. I'm trying to let it. I'm going to turn best into a word, best itself into me as much as it possibly can. Um, and when it's sexual erotic, right? Um, you get this tremendous. And here's where we have to be really careful, because of course there's Darwinian mechanisms. We just find people attractive, um, and then there's often a transmutation that happens when you erotically love someone. They become beautiful for you. um, so attraction can lead us into eros, but eros can convert attraction into beauty, in which you start to get a sense that the way they're shiny to you is actually shining from a depth. And so you start to be able to, beauty means you can start to see into them. So I mean, I tell Sarah maybe 10,000 times a day how beautiful she is, because, and I, but I also write her poetry. I do, because I'm trying to convey that while I obviously find her very sexually attractive, there's something more. She's like music. She's like what I was talking about with Tom the other day. She's like music to me, and it's a varying music. It's not the same. It's not the same song. She's a song of songs, and I've part of what I know it means when I erotically love her. I want to be one with that. I want to, like the way you're one with music. I want to become a profound listener of her music. So that would be my answer to your question.
That's lovely. Yeah, I can really resonate with the
Ah, nice pun.
wanting to. I did not even notice. Yeah, I can resonate with wanting to become one with music in a really kind of embodied way. Like,
Yeah.
and I realize I'm asking all these like, well, how do I know, in my body?
Do
Because
you start to find Ethan's mannerisms even lovely? Like I'll point, like Sarah will hold her hand in a certain way, in a way in which no other human being has ever held their hand before me, and I'll just say, "Look at that! I love that. That's what I mean." That's not sort of like, oh, that sexual, I'm not dismiss enjoy that sexual desire. That's a good thing, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this other thing, right? Like just the way, like when she'll her head will go over her shoulder and she'll smile at me, and I'll go, "Oh my God, I hope you do that with me for the rest of my life." That kind of thing.
it's so sweet. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I look at Ethan's face and it's just like glowing
Yeah.
in a way that I can't explain. And I'm like, I don't think I'm looking at it as like an object. It's like, oh, I want to peer into it. Like there's
Yes.
something
Yes.
that's like, yeah, I do know that feeling. And I asked that question, I think, because there are so many scripts of love or ways of loving that society has, whether it's
Yeah.
like, and that sometimes really, confuses me, at least, like just speaking from myself. Yeah,
You,
whether
you,
it's,
sorry.
romantic love or
Yeah.
friendship or even familial love. Yeah, and I wonder how
Yeah.
to.
I've become increasingly critical of decadent romanticism and decadent buddyhood. Um, um, we've completely lost fellowship. We've lost how to share philia with people that that are not, profound intimates in our life. We used to have that. We used to be able to do that. People used to be able to go to festivals, or go to church, or they could. I mean, we have a little bit of fellowship left in sports arenas. That's where people experience fellowship still. I don't know that person 3 feet over, but we're sharing in something together. Um, but we've tended to lose fellowship. We've reduced friendship to having buddies, you know, and that I think is very problematic. And I think romantic comedies and the decadent romanticism in our culture really undermine our romantic relationships in a profound way. I think one of the things I've become increasingly convinced that one way of understanding there's more dimensions than this. So one dimension of understanding the advent of the sacred is a profound, and I mean this in Tolkien's sense, a profound and comprehensive recovery of love, because I think it has been tremendously impoverished. I think another dimension is realizing that the sacred is moving into domains that were not touched by the legacy religions, like social media, dealing with AI, um, uh, other things like that. But I think this recovery of Eros and Philia and Agape is, I think, one of the most pronounced ways in which the advent of the sacred is expressing itself. We've lost how much love is, well, it is a virtue and a virtuosity that can usher us into a way of life that is like it, and it this is and see this is the problem. We hear hallmark cards and saccharine pronouncements and drippy musical comedies and romantic comedies, but it becomes a fundamental way of life in which good people are living good lives, and we've lost that.
I want to drill into the abyss of loss here, as I tend to like to do. If it's dark, I'll look into it, right? So, and for me, it's around this thing where, I had a difficult childhood growing up.
Yes.
And I think, I see Ellie nodding as well. And I imagine that's something that's present for you as well, John. So,
Yes.
to call back to something that you had talked about earlier, which was that the our beloved loves us in ways that we in a way didn't know we needed, right?
Yeah.
And are not familiar with, and those two are comorbid. And of course, the thing that I'm pointing at, is a kind of trauma, right? It's kind of like small t developmental trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So how would somebody like myself, like Ellie, who's really trying to orient to the virtue and virtuosity of love, come into right relationship with love, with this baggage, with this history? And I think part of that is because there is a growing cynicism, particularly around sort of like me and Ellie's generation, of like, dating's really hard. So I'm either going to manipulate this person into a sexual entanglement with me for as long as I can hold it together, or I'm just going to like give up and say it's no point and live in some kind of involuntary celibacy, right? Or not to point at the incel community that directly, but I think it's more widespread than is necessarily located to one
Yeah.
particular echelon. So what can we do to enter into that reclamation?
So first of all, stop trying to recover one of the loves on their own. Like if you're trying to find romantic love and you're not cultivating philia, both friendship and fellowship, and you don't know how to experience eros outside of sexual encounter, you're not ready for a romantic relationship. You are fundamentally immature. You have to grow those. This is why this is a virtue, right? Um, you also, I mean, so, and we have empirical evidence for this. Show up in your relationship with your partner with some very good external help, could be a book, could be a therapist, and realize secure attachment. Fewer and fewer of us have secure attachment styles. We have anxious, we have avoidant, and we have disorganized. Don't go into a relationship without bearing the responsibility and the honesty of that. Now, what's really quite magical, and this is another creative aspect of agape, how agape can restore personhood. The thing that reliably helps people to get out of anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachments is to be in a committed relationship with somebody who has a secure attachment style. And it takes a lot of work to move towards secure attachment. And we get a lot, and this goes towards Ellie's point, we get a lot of bullshit and bad noise about, codependent, you're in a codependent relationship, dysfunctional, blah, 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 blah. Because we carry around this bullshit notion of a monological monadic self that has to always have its autonomy as paramount. Kant, Immanuel Kant, have to have your autonomy as paramount, and all this bullshit, when the evidence is overwhelming that we function best psychologically, cognitively, emotionally. We show up better for other people. We show up in more multiple domains of our life if we are in a secure attachment relationship. We are inherently dialogical, and secure attachment is the felt experience that one is in a secure attachment relationship to some degree of intensity and to some degree of commitment of duration. And so cultivate all of the loves. Show up bearing the responsibility and learning the science for realizing secure attachment. And what does that mean? Your cynicism, and I don't mean you in particular, Ethan, I'm just talking to the people, you, the generalized you, and I know what it's like. Whenever I've dated, I often think, how does the human species survive? We're not going to reproduce. This is too hard. But, right, the cynicism is you're confusing the urgency of your need with the competency to realize it, which is a profound form of bullshit. That's one of the prototypical things Socrates was against. You have to cultivate all the loves. You have to learn about your attachment style. Jeff McDonald, my friend at the University of Toronto, calls attachment theory the way, the truth, and the life of relationships. He's quoting the Gospel of John. The loves come together. The love is virtue. It's bound up to other virtues. And that it's bound up to a kind of wisdom, a kind of a profound Socratic self-knowledge. What's your attachment style? What do you practice every day for moving towards a secure attachment style? If perhaps you have a secure attachment style, for deepening it, learning about it, and being more prepared to understand those, your partner, your friends, who might not have it. I think this is my answer to your question.
Thanks, John. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I want to just pop it open now for the live Q&A. So, if you have questions, please type them into the chat. If not, if you're on a browser, you should see a button at the bottom that says request to call in. I think you can click that, and then what I can do is to actually allow, almost like a talk show. I love this, right? To get folks to kind of like come in and you can call in and ask a question. This is a new format that we're trying on Riverside this time as opposed to Google Meet, so it's a little bit different. We might have to work out some bugs, but let's see if I can hold that question while fighting off the import technology. So let's leave a few moments for that. Can I just in that block while folks are maybe typing in a question? I'm curious, like Ellie, how does that land for you? Because we talk about attachment styles fairly often. And I'm wondering how that lands with you, what John has just shared.
It's so clear. It's almost like a 3-step process to loving. No, that's just the way my mind kind of tries to clarify things. I think something that's coming up for me is in the past. So, like, I have an avoidant attachment style, and Ethan has more of an anxious attachment style, and in the past
That's a
I used.
prototypical pattern, by the way.
So I've
That,
heard.
yeah.
Yeah, and what I used to believe was that I have to, like clean up my own shit and get myself to a secure attachment style, then I can start interacting with
Yeah, doesn't work that way.
people. Yeah, now I know it's more of like it that we grow. Something Ethan said very early on in our relationship, which I now know comes, I think, from you, is that like the more that we love I forgot how it went, but it's like the more that we love each other, I become more me and you become more you.
Yes. Yeah.
Something like that. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
And that goes towards, again, this is the destruction of the Kantian fable of autonomy. And Kant had no place for love in his whole system, which I think is the most damning criticism of his whole project. Love plays no role in knowing; it plays no role in morality, um, or no significant role. And I think we put that we realize we actually most become ourselves in dialogical relationship, not through a monologue of talking to ourselves. Of course, we should have soliloquies in our life, um, but they can't be the predominant vehicle by which we realize who and what we are. That's not the kind of entities we are. This is where we're either in an I it or we're in an I thou. And so if you, I'm just working on myself, well, that means you're probably just doing a lot of I it relationships to everything around you. So yeah, that's very, very important. The thing that is very concerning, of course, is the loneliness epidemic, and a lot of things that seem unrelated, but you can see them all as constellating around this loss of love. Music is becoming less complex, which means it less and less calls for love. It now and now more appeals to sort of a lust, a quick, hard pounding beat, very simplistic, often graphic lyrics, the whole kind of thing. And that's not my opinion. That's the conclusion of many different musicologists and music historians. Music is going through this massive truncation. We have loneliness, so we're losing all the other loves, and we're drenched right now in people in isolation watching romantic comedies, which is a very, very dangerous place for us to be in.
So on the back of that, because when you talk about Buber, we're invoking a kind of study, and
Yes.
it's not just a theoretical study. It's not just reading the book. It's also in practice.
Yeah, it's a practice.
And that's also present in attachment styles, that it is not just, okay, I understand how to categorize people now based on how I see them on my Bumble feed, but it's deeply about being able to, as you mentioned, like, how do you practice building a particular kind of attachment in your life, in your interactions, even outside of a romantic relationship. So this keys into Lauren's question, which I'll now show, which is whether do you have any recommendations for where to learn about the attachment styles, and
Yes, just
bearing in mind,
yeah, go ahead.
bearing in mind that there's a lot of information out there. I think a lot of influencers on social media now do sort of attachment style stuff, and there's a way in which sometimes I look at that and go, that's kind of not quite it.
Yeah, I
Do you have
recommend.
anything?
Yeah, just hang
Yeah.
on one sec.
Immediately it's like bookshelf.
Yes. It's one of the best things about John. It's like, do you have any recommendation? Yes, here.
He comes out with a stack.
Do we have something on our bookshelf back there as well, Papa?
So here are some books to recommend. And I recommend going to the people that really know what they're talking about. And so I'm just going to give you three, not so as to not overwhelm. This is a great book right here, Attached, So I'm not seeing this on my screen right now, Ethan. I'm just seeing you. So, but are you seeing the book? So
Yeah.
attached, and the new science of adult attachment and how it can help you find and keep love is a very good book. Then two excellent books by the person who I think is at the cutting edge of this, and this is Dr. Susan Johnson. Attachment Theory and Practice, Emotionally Focused Therapy with Individuals, Couples, and Families. And then Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love by Dr. Sue Johnson.
Beautiful.
So these are the books that I strongly recommend looking at the people who do the research and have the clinical experience. I strongly recommend you don't just look at influencers and what Bob thinks about attachment style. I'm not telling you to listen to me. Notice, I'm telling you who are the responsible and respected scientists and therapists, and Sue Johnson is both a good researcher and a good therapist. Who are the people out there who know what they're talking about because they have the research and they have the practical experience behind them? So I recommend those books.
And I want to add on to that as well, this piece about how it moves into emotion focused therapy.
Yes.
That can be sometimes intimidating for folks, where it's like, oh no, but I don't study EFT. Taylor Barrett's wife, actually, Jo, studies EFT, and we've had a conversation about this, that she found circling very, very good as a scaffolding practice into learning EFT.
Yeah, very. Excellent recommendation, Ethan. Thank you for that. That's an excellent recommendation. I think once you're doing circling, you then want to add dialectic into dialogos in the Socratic search space, so you get better at resonance and reverence.
Yes, and that's the bridge that moves it from like just regulating oneself in a pseudo-romantic situation, or hopefully about to be romantic situation, and elevating it to the level of virtue. And I think the companion to that would be I would add one more book to that list, from Eric Fromm, The Art of Loving.
Sure,
and
I think
that
very good book
homes
too.
it.
Yeah, very good. That's a very good
book.
book too. Yeah, very good book. Excellent recommendation.
Is there I'm curious if there are any more questions from the chat. Lauren says thank you. Yes. Yes. Is there I think Sabri says here, our dear Sabri, who is who often comes in on Lectern Q&As, is unfortunately at a restaurant today. It's a bit too noisy.
Okay. Say hi to him.
Hello, Sabri. we can see and we can hear you. Is there a question here? Fascinating. Okay, so Sabri says, I was considering love as being paradigmatic and at the levels of psyche and reality, psycho-ontology. Love as an emotion, as an orientation, as a perception and ability to see the infinite depth of another, and then as a state of being, as a state of emanation.
Mm-hmm.
And how our experience of love depends on the paradigm we are in. Yeah, do you have thoughts on that?
I think that's fundamentally right. I think this gets towards sort of existentialism and existential therapy around love. There's a way in which your love is an aspiration to a kind of reciprocally opening attunement. That's why we're using all these resonance and reverence metaphors. That is ultimately bound and conditioned by your worldview attunement, which is what he's pointing towards there. And that's what, and worldview attunement is very much what Thomas Kuhn is pointing to when he uses the word paradigm, like in paradigmatic. Although he uses it with multiple different senses, and there's a whole philosophical problem around that, but we'll just put that aside. It's over here. Okay. So one of the things that, let's do something that's really obvious, and this is in L'Étranger, The Stranger by Camus. Mercedes has a particular lack of worldview attunement, and this makes his love relationship, we witness it as something almost the way you witness a strange insect moving around on in front of you in a way that's almost horrifying because of how uncanny it is. It's foreign, and it represents such an unexpected distortion of something that you're sort of right. What is that? And so Merceau lacks Merceau. It's Marseille, I think, right?
It's Mercedes.
Yeah, Marseille. Sorry about that mistake. Merceau, I don't know who I'm thinking. Anyways, Marseille is, he's because he's caught up in this absurdism, a profound lack of worldview attunement that discolors and distorts his. My girlfriend asked me if I loved her. I didn't know, so I said yes. That kind of weird stuff. The fact that he kills the Arab so dispassionately, or the haunting way the whole book begins. Mother died today, and he talks about it the way you talk about, it was a little bit colder today than yesterday, and so I think that's a profound point. And this is how it connects to the advent of the sacred. Our attempts at love. I wish people would really hear what I'm about to say. Our attempts at love will ultimately be thwarted by huge forces that are coming from our worldview that are often unconscious to us. If you're in a particular, if you lack a profound worldview attunement, profound love is going to be exceedingly challenging for you, because your world is going to be constantly at odds with your love. And that ultimately doesn't work if love is not an emotion, if it's an existential mode, if it's an existential stance. Your capacity for love is not separable from your other existential modes, especially the master mode of worldview attunement.
Yeah, the way that I heard you say that, it's funny because like there's your real voice that I'm hearing, and then there's the imaginal version of you that sort of sits in the back of my head. Now they're talking. Is that like, I wonder if another way of thinking of the advent of the sacred is the reclamation of love for the world.
I've said this for quite some time, and putting them together like you just did is, I think, exactly appropriate. I think the ultimate way out of nihilism is learning to fall in love with the world again. And one of my critiques of the meaning in life construct is people can absolutely hate the world, find it chaotic, untrustworthy, filled with bullshit, and yet their lives are meaningful, which strikes me as a reduction of meaning in life to such a vapid and superficial thing that it has been removed from things as profound as love. And that is very, very telling.
So just one, because this will be our last question. I think that now we went into the individual to kind of like open it up on a larger scale, since we're kind of already there. Luke's question takes us to a good place on that, which is how can we apply these lessons on love to some specific problems on our cultural horizon, like the advent of AGI, the ecology, the climate, conflict, the war, and the growing wealth gap?
There's a
Easy
sense
question.
and there's a sense which I don't think I'm inadequate to answer this question, so I'm merely addressing it, but I want to be helpful. I think, given what I've just said, you have to practice what I said to Ellie locally, but and this is the ecological slogan, right? But I also have to think globally. I have to look for the advent of the sacred. I have to try and afford the recovery of all of the loves. I have to recover how there has to be a deep at-one-ment between any love I'm pursuing and the worldview that I'm inhabiting. So, for example, AGI, and I mean this as a very soft criticism of Jeff Hinton, who I admire. He's brilliant. His work has deeply influenced mine, often sort of, and I was resistant to it. And so we had an interesting relationship, kind of distant, somewhat distant, and we would bump into each other and not quite always be at odds, but not in any way that was acrimonious. It was very interesting. And I respect him for what he's done. But what he's done bespeaks something to me, which is I think I have a pretty good grasp on Jeff's worldview and his view of what cognition is and consciousness is. And then I'm wondering, what it is he loves about human beings? What it is that he loves about human beings such that he thinks we should be preserved at the expense of these machines coming into existence? That's what he's proposing. He's advocating they may destroy us. Well, why not, Jeff? Why not? What is it about us that you love so much that we should destroy the machines rather than let them destroy us? That's your message. And I want to ask all the people that are fretting about AGI, and I'm concerned about AGI, and I do a lot to try and address it, both in terms of education and in terms of promoting technologies that can help empower people to address it. I'm working on all of that. So I take it seriously. But I want to ask all the people who are like, what is it about human beings that you love? Like, let's talk very abstractly for a moment. What if the machines were completely, clearly, morally superior to us in every way? They were more virtuous than us. They were capable of more beauty, generating more beauty, doing more good, knowing more truth. They treated each other and all living things better than we do. Shouldn't they replace us? I mean, we make choices between us and chimps. And I think killing a chimp is murder. But if it comes between a chimp and Sarah, sorry, the chimp dies. That's how it goes. So we have to get very clear. We can't afford to be murky, romantic comedy, fuzzy. I love the warm and fuzzies. We can't be fuzzy about love anymore. We have to be very clear. What is it about human beings that we love? And do we have a worldview that actually sustains and legitimates that view of human beings and how they are lovely to us? Because if you don't have a coherent response to the threat of AGI. You just have a very brutal, I don't want to die. But if they ever got to the state where they were worthy of moral regard, the machines would also not want to die. And now we're back into the same issue. Why them rather than you? We really need to get much, much clearer about what it is we love. And this is not an option anymore. This is exigent. We need to get very clear on what we love about human beings in the face of AGI. And we have to reprioritize it. And I think that can have an impact on the way we treat each other, on conflicts. I'm not a utopian. I don't believe in. And one day, like at the end of Great Gatsby, one day, one day. That's such a powerful ending to that book because that F. Scott Fitzgerald is just slamming, right, that utopianism. So I'm not proposing that, but I am, and that's why I'm not answering your question fully. What it will take to rejuvenate democracy, to rejuvenate science, to rejuvenate spirituality, to do that in an integrated way that affords and the advent of the sacred, that gives us an ecology of religions, like we strive for an ecology of practices, where we come to see that maybe what the divine is doing is like, because I'm reading literature, often written by Christians, by the way, about look, well, if we move to a real acceptance of pluralism, we have to deeply, vulnerably accept that we can learn something of true transformative significance from a religion other than our own. So, if I want to learn about agape, Christianity, excellent. But if I want to learn about flow, I go to Taoism. If I want to learn about mindfulness, I go to Buddhism. And pay attention to the history. Christianity recovered its mindfulness practices by people who went through Buddhism, went through Zen. Right? If I really want to get into non-duality, Vedanta is fantastic for that, etc. And so I think another thing that has to happen is, how do we bring love for humanity together with the advent of the sacred and a love for a participatory pluralism that is needed to address the issues we're in. And I think if we don't answer these questions, we don't have a deep response to AGI. We don't have a deep response to the advent of the sacred. Another significant dimension is in addition to the recovery of love, is the proper inhabiting, apprehension, appropriation of a true pluralism. Because that is not going away. And all of our old solutions, imperialism, my religion will conquer yours, right? Incrementalism, your religion is just an earlier, immature version of mine, and one day, with my help, you'll get there, right? Liberal toleration, oh, we all just believe something, right? And then a kind of illusionism. Well, they're all illusions, and and reality is so like all of those we've tried. They don't work. We need something else, and there's a lot of people working on that. And I think that what I see driving that is a profound capacity for a Christian to love Vedanta, for a Zen Buddhist to love Neoplatonism. That's what I see.
I'm taken by the sweetness of your smile, babe.
Because I want to be in true service to that.
I'm curious to hear from somebody who is trained as an environmental scientist. Ellie, what your thought is on that? Because I'm not familiar, and I say that because I'm not familiar with that side of the argument. And what have you seen?
An example from something I read recently came up, and it's about kind of human nature relationships and how we can be less instrumental with that in those relationships. And the example that was given was a teacher who wants to teach her students about the beauty and kind of anatomy of a leaf. A teacher who picks a leaf off a tree and brings it to her students is very different from a teacher who would bring her students to the tree.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's almost like a parable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that came up when you were talking about proper pluralism, and I really love what you said about getting to a point where a Christian could deeply love, a Buddhist practice, or have enough space in their worldview for multiple ways of being. Yeah.
And I'm coming, and this is a little bit the influence of Faber and his book, The Ocean of God, where he's integrating Whitehead and Baha'i. I'm trying to learn how to pronounce it correctly in Farsi. That there's a reason, perhaps, and I want to be very careful here, but having these multiple religions with the different virtues and different ways of being in the world, it's like the way we love different people. and it's a way of being appropriately related to ultimate reality. It disposes us to the possibility of an ecology of religions that would actually bring us more closely in relationship to the sacred. So
That's a beautiful note to end on. And I hear you invoking Sopherson in that, John.
yes, yeah, very much, very much.
So before we close, I want to say a thank you to everybody who is viewing. Thank you very, very much for all your wonderful questions. As always, we'll be doing another one of these next month. And I think it's fair to say that what's coming up as a theme for next month is virtue. And that's something which I'm deeply excited about. The proper proportioning of them as we go on to, because that I think will be in April, and then we're on the Silk Road after that, very imminently.
Yeah, very much.
So, any closing statements from Dr. John Vervaeke, and soon to be Dr. Ellie Chan?
I'll let Ellie go first.
I'm with a kind of abundance, like a feeling of abundance of ideas or abundance of possibilities, and with a lot of hope, which I didn't expect. Yeah. And it feels simultaneously grounding and like my body, my skin is expanding. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Ellie. Final words from me. I have said this and I'll say it again. I've come to realize that my deepest aspiration is to learn how to love wisely and to become fully trustworthy of love. Those are my two deepest aspirations. I am firmly convinced that if I were to the degree to which I realize those is the degree to which I will be a good person leading a good life that makes a good impact on other people.
Yeah, and I'll end off by saying that every day that I try to learn to love well, I'm faced with how many more ways there are to love more wisely, more well.
Yes.
I think that's a feature, not a bug.
Yes, very much.
Thank you all, everybody. Thank you, everybody viewing. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ellie. We'll see you all next month. I love you both.
You too.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.